They told me the couch was all that was left in the house I paid for. That night, I didn't say a word, but I left the lease on the table the next morning. It was supposed to be a family vacation. A chance to reconnect, unwind, be together. Like we used to when I was little. That's how they sold it to me, as a shared memory in the making. But even the way we arrived said otherwise. I got there first. I picked up the keys, stocked the fridge, laid out the towels. I signed the lease with my name, front and center, and paid for the deposit with a bonus from work. But when they walked in, it was like I was just housekeeping. Mom started directing people immediately. You take that room, that one's yours. Put the baby stuff here. I watched as every bedroom got claimed, and no one looked in my direction, not even once. I wasn't invisible, I was being ignored on purpose. When I asked where I should put my bag, she said without even pausing, "Oh, the couch is fine, honey," like it was obvious, like that's where I belonged. My brother and his girlfriend didn't even blink. I looked at the couch, floral, sagging, probably older than me. It sat directly under the vent. No privacy, no space. I said, "Actually, I thought I'd be in the loft." She waved me off. "Oh, sweetie, let's not make this a thing." Everyone's tired, so I said nothing. I placed my bag beside the couch and sat down. No one said thank you. No one asked if I was okay. They just went back to settling into the house I rented, the space I made possible. Dinner was loud. My seat was the folding chair at the edge of the table. Mom served my plate last. My brother made a joke about me being the urban maid, and they all laughed. I didn't. They didn't forget me. They dismissed me. Later that night, I lay on that couch under a thin throw blanket, listening to the ceiling creak as everyone else got ready for bed. I stared at the beams above me and tried to find one moment that felt like love. I found none. I could have reminded them. I could have pulled out the lease right then, but I didn't. Because I knew it wouldn't change the rooms, just reveal the truth they were pretending not to see. So I waited. I let the silence settle around me like armor, and somewhere between midnight and morning, I decided, I won't demand space anymore. I'll claim it without asking. Growing up, I wasn't the favorite. I was the helper, the one who knew how to set the table without being asked, who brought water before anyone noticed they were thirsty. My mom praised efficiency, not emotion. My younger brother, Ethan, was the son. Everything revolved around him. If he cried, plans were rearranged. If he failed, there was always a reason. If I succeeded, there was always a bigger spotlight waiting for him. Dad was passive, present but distant. He'd glance up from his paper, smile, and return to silence when I needed reassurance. I got shrugs when I needed space. I got expectations. I wasn't raised to be seen. I was raised to serve. In school, I became the reliable one. Teachers loved me. I got straight A's, helped in every group project, and never caused trouble at home. That meant fewer hugs, not more. Success was expected, not celebrated. Vacations were always chaotic. Mom planned everything. Ethan complained about everything, and I packed everyone's bags. I learned that joy came in crumbs, and I had to be grateful for even those. The first time I tried to speak up, I was 13. I asked why Ethan always got the bigger room. Mom said, "Don't start that." Dad nodded in agreement. That was the end of that conversation, and most others like it. In college, I stayed local to help with family needs. I missed out on campus life, late-night dorm stories, independence. I thought maybe if I showed loyalty, they'd finally see me. All it did was teach them they could ask for more. Being dependable became my only identity. When I got my first job, I put part of my paycheck toward groceries for their house. Mom would say, "You don't have to," but let me do it anyway. Ethan never offered, but he got applause just for visiting. So when I suggested the vacation, a gift, a gesture, I thought it would mean something. I thought this time, maybe they'd say, "Thank you." Maybe they'd give me the master room, just once. But from the moment we arrived, I felt it, that slow, familiar fade. I was back in my childhood home, except now the walls had changed, and the sofa was older. They acted like I was lucky to be included, like my presence was a favor they extended, not a foundation they stood on. Like the couch was some kind of privilege I should be thankful for, and I almost believed them. Until I remembered the lease. Looking back, the signs were always there, little moments of correction, dismissal, belittling disguised as teasing. I was always the one being laughed at, never with. Ethan would forget things constantly. Mom would say, "Boys are just like that." If I forgot once, I got a lecture on responsibility and a silent dinner. Fairness was never part of our household vocabulary. When I bought my first car, no one came to see it. When Ethan borrowed it without asking and returned it with a dent, Mom said, "Don't be dramatic." Dad just handed me a 20 and said, "Things happen in our house." Loyalty meant silence. I learned to be agreeable, to take the smallest slice of cake, to give up the remote, to fold my anger into smiles. I didn't realize it was training for a lifetime of being background. At family gatherings, I was the server, plates, drinks, napkins, always standing. Ethan sat like royalty. Everyone joked, "She's such a little hostess." I smiled. I hated that nickname. When I bought gifts, I overcompensated. Thoughtful. Wrapped with care, always personal. They'd open them, nod politely, and move on. Ethan once gave a half-used candle to Dad, and it got passed around like treasure. The worst part wasn't what they said. It was the shrug when I tried to explain how I felt. "You're too sensitive." Mom would say, "Don't ruin the mood." That phrase haunted me. So I stopped talking. I stopped hoping. I became efficient. Invisibility was painful, but manageable. Hope was what truly hurt. They didn't break me with words. They erased me with absence, even in the group chats. I was the one asked to book reservations, to research, to plan, and when I did it well, they changed the plans last minute without telling me. I once showed up to a dinner that had been moved, and no one thought to text. The idea for the vacation came from exhaustion. I thought, maybe, if I create something they can't ignore, they'll finally see me. So I found the cabin, negotiated the price, signed the lease. I put my name on that contract like it was a declaration of worth, a symbol, something real. I wanted them to be proud, or at least surprised, but they weren't. They didn't ask how I did it. They didn't ask why I wanted to. They just assumed it was their right to walk in, assign rooms, and put me on the couch, and I let them until I didn't. The second night, it got colder. I asked Mom if there was an extra blanket somewhere. She pointed at a kitchen drawer and said, "Maybe check there. Honey, we're all out." Everyone else had duvets. I sat on the couch, shivering, listening to laughter from the other rooms. Ethan had the fireplace suite, the one I quietly hoped they'd let me have. I heard his music playing, his girlfriend's voice singing along. At dinner, I tried to join the conversation. I mentioned a project I just launched at work, my biggest yet. Mom cut in, "Let Ethan tell you about his crypto stuff. He's making waves." I fell quiet again. They didn't care what I built, only what they could brag about. Later, Mom pulled me aside. "Don't be upset," she said. "You're just more low maintenance." "You've always been that way." I stared at her. Low maintenance, like a spare tire, like a piece of furniture. She smiled and patted my shoulder. "It's a compliment, Meg. You don't need much." I nodded like I understood. But inside, something cracked so loudly I could barely hear her next words. The final blow came the third night. Ethan's girlfriend had forgotten her skincare bag. I offered her a few things from mine. The next morning, I saw my moisturizer in her room, nearly empty. "No thank you." I went to the kitchen and found Mom and Ethan looking through the cabin rules. "We might extend the stay," she said. "Would that be okay with you?" I blinked. "I mean, you're not using any days off, right?" I was. They didn't just ignore my boundaries, they assumed I had none. I walked outside, phone in hand, heart racing. I looked at the lease again, my name, signed, my credit card, my deposit. I felt like a fool. I'd bought the stage just to be written out of the script. That night, I came back inside and everyone was watching a movie. My favorite one. They didn't save me a spot. The couch was piled with their bags and coats. I stood there, just watching. No one moved. No one looked up. I slowly took the bags off, sat on the armrest, and stared at the screen without blinking. I didn't follow the plot. My mind was writing a different ending. I didn't speak the rest of the night. I ate alone, cleaned up alone, slept cold, and for the first time, I stopped hoping they'd notice. I started planning. That morning, I woke up with stiffness in my neck and a heaviness in my chest I couldn't explain away. I walked into the kitchen to make coffee. Someone had used the last of the beans I brought and left the empty bag in the cabinet. I stood there for a long time, holding that bag like it had something to say. It didn't, but I did. I just couldn't find the words, because where do you start when you've been erased so carefully? So consistently, I tried to pour myself cereal. The milk was gone. Ethan had finished it the night before and left the empty carton in the fridge. Like always, like nothing. You start to feel crazy when everyone around you treats your presence like a convenience. Mom walked in and saw me standing there. "Oh, can you run to the store? Ethan's girlfriend wants oat milk." I turned, slowly. "I'm not going anywhere." My voice didn't shake. It dropped like a stone. She blinked. "Excuse me?" I stepped back and just said it. "I'm not the maid. I'm not the extra. I'm not the couch." She laughed, the worst kind, the disbelief kind. "Megan, don't be ridiculous." I walked past her into the dining area and opened the drawer where I kept the lease. I pulled it out and laid it flat on the table. "You see that name? That's mine. This is my rental, your guests." No one said a word, even Ethan froze. The only sound was the ceiling fan above us, spinning too fast for such a quiet room. I left the lease there and walked out. Not with anger, with finality. I didn't cry. I didn't slam the door. I just picked up my keys, grabbed my bag, and left the couch behind, permanently. I didn't explode, I evaporated. I drove for hours with no destination, just silence, and breath and the sound of tires on road. I stopped at a lake and sat by the water. I didn't call anyone. I just stared at the surface until I couldn't tell if it was shaking or I was. I thought about every time I let things slide, every couch I accepted, every room I gave up, every sentence I swallowed. I thought about how small I had made myself just to fit into their version of love, and I made a decision: no more. I stayed at a quiet motel that night. Cheap sheets, buzzing light, but it felt more mine than the cabin ever did. I locked the door behind me and sat cross-legged on the bed, Lease in my lap. Like it had something to teach me that paper was more than a rental agreement. It was proof that I existed, that I contributed, that I deserved space. It had always been right there. I just never believed it was enough to matter. I ran my fingers over my name. Bold at the bottom, Megan Carter. Not helper, not low maintenance, not easygoing, just Megan, and it felt radical. That lease held something they never gave me: recognition. The next day, I sent a group message: "The cabin is paid through Friday. You're welcome to stay. Please clean before you leave. I won't be back." I turned off read receipts. I didn't care for their reactions anymore. No one replied, but I could feel the weight shift. The silence wasn't absence, it was awareness. They knew what I meant. They just didn't know what to do without my usual retreat. A week later, I was back home when a package arrived. No note, just the lease, folded carefully. And a small keychain, a tiny couch. I stared at it for a full minute before placing it in a drawer I rarely opened. They returned the lease, but they still hadn't returned respect. I didn't reach out. I didn't need a conversation. I didn't want an apology that came only after consequences. What I wanted, what I had, was distance. And in that distance, I found clarity. I wasn't dramatic. I wasn't overreacting. I was exhausted from building bridges that only I walked across. The lease didn't make me powerful. Realizing I never needed their approval did. At work, I told my manager I was ready to lead the upcoming team project. I stopped softening my voice in meetings. I bought myself a new couch, velvet green, full of spine and softness at once. It wasn't about the couch. It was about finally sitting somewhere I chose, where I belonged, where no one had to offer me space, because it was mine to begin with. My revenge wasn't fire. It was frost, cold, controlled, deliberate. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't write long texts. I just stopped replying, and slowly they noticed the quiet. Birthdays came and went. I didn't send reminders. I didn't show up for dinner. I didn't ask how Ethan was doing, or whether Mom liked her new curtains. I simply vanished from the obligation list. It took them for months to call. I let it go to voicemail. "Hey, sweetie," Mom said. "Hope you're okay, we miss you." I played it twice, not for the message, but for the unfamiliar tone. Uncertainty. They don't apologize for what they did. They panic when you stop accepting it. I didn't respond. Instead, I hosted a dinner at my apartment, just friends, chosen family, people who asked about my day and listened to the answer. We laughed until midnight and toasted to starting over. At one point, I caught myself glancing at the green couch. My couch. I smiled, because no one was fighting for it. No one expected me to give it up. It just was mine. A few weeks later, Mom emailed, not called, emailed. "We're thinking of doing another trip. Would love to include you. Let us know what works for you." I didn't answer. Instead, I forwarded the message to a new folder titled Unopened Invitations. It joined a list of others. Silent evidence of boundaries finally kept. Silence isn't absence. Its protection, I began traveling on my own, places I wanted to see. No compromise, no shared itineraries, no silent treatment over breakfast. I walked alone through cities and felt more connected than I ever did at our family table. Every small act of self-prioritization felt like rebellion. Buying my own luggage, booking my own suite, setting the thermostat to my temperature, choosing where to sleep and who to trust with my comfort. They called it distance, I called it healing. And in every quiet moment I didn't return the call, didn't respond to the bait, didn't fill the void they left open. I reclaimed a piece of myself they never cared to know. The invitation came on thick paper, ivory, gold-trimmed, expensive. It was for Ethan's engagement party, hosted by Laura and David Carter. My name wasn't mentioned, not even once. I smiled when I opened it, not because I was invited, but because it confirmed everything I'd come to know. I was no longer in their plans. But they still wanted my presence. I didn't RSVP. Instead, I booked a weekend getaway to the same cabin, the one from before. I signed the lease again, paid in full, and requested one extra thing, a plaque with my name on the door. This time, they weren't invited. When I arrived, it felt like stepping into a rewritten memory. I opened every drawer, every cabinet, and found nothing missing, nothing used without asking. No one assigning me a corner. The silence was clean. I sat on the couch with a warm blanket and coffee, journal in hand. I wrote one sentence on the first page. She gave them comfort, they gave her a couch. I underlined it twice. In my bag, I had brought the cocaine. They mailed me the tiny couch. I placed it on the windowsill, beside the plaque with my name. Let them watch each other. Let them know who stayed. I took photos, not for Instagram, but for remembrance. Proof that peace doesn't require permission, that healing can happen in the same place where harm lived. You don't need closure when you're living the continuation. On the final night, I lit a fire and sat alone in the quiet. No phone, no thoughts of whether they missed me, no weight of who I used to be, just breath and stillness. The lease was still on the table like last time, but this time there was no audience, just me, and that was enough. I folded it neatly, placed it in my journal, and zipped the bag. I would keep the papers, not as proof, but as reminders of what I no longer owe. As I closed the cabin door, I turned back and smiled, not in triumph, in liberation. For once, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was taking everything that mattered with me.